Hi everyone, I'm Paul DiGiuseppe and I'm the Planning Director for the town of Norton. And I'm here to give a brief overview of a zoning bylaw proposed change that we will be presenting at the fall town meeting. It is known as Article 18 currently. So the purpose of this proposed amendment is to improve the usability, consistency, and legal defensibility of the zoning bylaw. So for those of us who use the zoning bylaw on a very regular basis, which would include the planning board, the zoning board of appeals, planning director, the building commissioner, the public, developers, we know there's a lot of good things with it, with the bylaw, but there's also a lot of challenges with it. Challenges range from how it's organized. Currently, many aspects are scattered throughout the current bylaw, and so one of the major changes we're proposing is to reorganize the zoning bylaw to group like items similarly and make it much easier for everyone to be able to follow. Additionally, we're making text changes because, again, there's a number of problems, but what we're making text changes for is for clarification. Oftentimes when we read provisions, it's not quite clear what something means, and two people could look at it and have very different interpretations. There's consistency issues, there's some errors, there's omissions. We also wanted to make sure that it was up to date and compliant with the most current Mass General Law and case law. And overall, too, the Planning Board and ZBA who meet and review projects on a regular basis experience some common issues with the bylaw, and this was an opportunity to fix those. We think all of these are benefits to the town. It helps provide more control over development and provides more tools to improve projects, improve amenities and the like. So why are we doing this now? Well, the main reason is this was called for in our master plan that was adopted in 2021. It called for us to review the bylaw and then make changes and present those changes at a town meeting, which is what we're doing. So this is just an example of the structure of the existing bylaw and what we're proposing to change it to. So currently we have 23 different zoning articles, and you can see the arrows are just giving an example of how related districts, in this case special districts and overlay districts, are scattered throughout the current bylaw, and we're putting it under one section. So you can see it's just grouping similar topics together and making it easier for people to find things. So we are also now making text changes, and there are a number of benefits to making these changes. The first is we're making this compliant with Mass General Law and case law. Now, the first two bullets you'll see on the screen are requirements that the state of Massachusetts passed recently in their efforts to promote more housing throughout the state. One requires all communities to allow accessory dwelling units to be allowed by right, and so we had to write a section to comply with that. I'm going to show you that in a little bit. Another is a grandfathering provision that said that if you have a 10,000 square foot lot and 75 feet of frontage under common ownership, you could build on it. Currently, those are considered non-conforming lots and unbuildable. There is also case law. We made a change to try to, we had to reduce the siting requirements for adult entertainment facilities from 1,000 feet to 500 feet from non-industrial zoning districts and other adult entertainment districts. So these three bullets are the very few changes that actually make development more allowable. The remainder of our changes we feel helps tighten development and will lead to better development. There was also a provision that we deleted that required the creation of affordable development if you had 6 or more subdivision lots. Our attorney, who was our consultant, said there were challenges with that, so we've ended up removing that. Another benefit is more local control. So again, the zoning bylaw is administered by either the planning board or the zoning board of appeals. We've added performance standards as well as conditions that can be used as tools to help improve a development. Or in some cases, it may be a further reason if we needed to deny one. But it's going to give the town more tools to try to get the best project possible. And one example of that is currently our bylaw says if you're developing in our village commercial zoning district, there are design guidelines that you could meet. They're just guidelines. They're not enforceable. But under the proposed bylaw, we're turning those guidelines into enforceable standards. So the important thing here is to know that the more standards we define, the more standards we control. We're also we took a good look at our use regulations, and we expanded some and we've tightened up a lot of them. We expanded some in that there were uses that we've added to the use table. The use table is important because it tells us what uses are allowed and where they can and can't go. But there were some uses like health clubs and breweries that we actually have, but we actually don't have a use or a definition in the current section, so we've added that. We've also established standards for sensitive uses, such as adult entertainment or senior housing. In some cases, like with adult entertainment, we're really strengthening where it can go because we want to make sure it's in an appropriate area and not in areas that, near residential areas, for example. And senior housing differently, but we've added standards for how those should be developed because we don't have them now. We don't have them for either one. Additionally, there are uses in state statute that are exempt from being able to require special permits. These are called Dover amendments, and these are uses such as schools and churches. But historically, what we have done in the town is if it was a use that's exempt, we've just required a building permit to be issued. But going forward under this bylaw, we would actually require a site plan review, which is approved by the planning board. The likelihood that it would still be approved, but it gives the town the ability to negotiate on something that might make the project better, more palatable. We've also added standards for reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities, and we're providing more guidance for accessory uses. I think the key point here is if we identify a use, we can regulate it. As I mentioned, the state has made a change on accessory dwelling units, and I wanted to point this out because I think this is probably the most substantial change that will allow more development to potentially occur. And this is all a potential, but so we currently do allow accessory dwelling units by right, but they have to be attached. So that might mean, for example, a unit in your basement or in the attic, but it's a separate living unit. But the state law says, in addition to attached, we have to allow detached units. So that might be a garage apartment. Our bylaw also says the accessory unit can't exceed 750 square feet, but the state law says it's 50% of a principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. So for example, if you had a 2,000 square foot house and you wanted to add an accessory unit, if you took 50%, that's 1,000 square feet. Well, that's too high. So the highest it could go was 900 square feet. Conversely, if you had a 1,000 square foot house and you wanted to add, then 50% is 500 square feet, and that's the maximum you could go. Our current bylaw requires an owner to occupy one of the two dwellings. That requirement for ownership was removed from Mass General Law, and we do need to comply with that. We also require one off-street parking space per bedroom. The law was changed by the state to only require one parking space per accessory dwelling unit. But I do want to point out, in our proposed bylaw, we will not be allowing short-term rentals of an accessory dwelling unit. There are standards for approving a special permit. Like anything else, it has to be clear why a project's getting approved or not approved. Most of the wording is largely the same, but I want to point out there were three additions that I think are really positive for both a neighborhood or community near a proposed development and the town as a whole. One is now the planning board or the ZBA, if they're approving a special permit, can now also look at potential fiscal impacts on town services, the tax base, and employment, which we've never been able to do before. But we also are going to make determinations based on traffic flow and safety, and also if there are adequate utilities such as water and sewer. Again, these are, I believe, positive benefits to both the local area and the municipality as a whole. So along those lines, we have added conditions that were not in the bylaw. In fact, if you were applying for a special permit only and not tied to a site plan, our bylaw actually had very few instances where conditions were applied. Well, we've changed that. Now we've made it very clear what those conditions are for both special permits and for site plans. And again, what's important here is this gives the town the authority to require amenities such as landscaping and buffering and lighting and other things that are really important to a project and important to the uses around it. We've also added performance standards. First, we've organized them from many different areas to under one area, and we've added performance standards. We've added standards for noise, fiscal impacts, and site development. And so finally, town meeting is October 20th at 7 p.m. at Norton High School, and we'd love to see you there. We actually have a very active bylaw web page that you can see the address right on this screen. And certainly, I would love to hear from you. And I have my contact information, both email and phone. I would just love to talk with you and answer any questions and see what we can do from there. So I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for listening to this video.